Mark.
Tyler, what's that above you right there? See it?
Right there.
What is that, babe?
Oh my God. Are you kidding me?
For nearly a century, people have reported contact with unidentified flying objects and extraterrestrial beings all over the world when they least expected it. From shocking close encounters of the first kind to terrifying close encounters of the seventh kind.
Ever since I had a close encounter, I have met tons of people who tell me about their experiences.
Now, for the first time in history, the U.S. government has publicly acknowledged the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena.
These things are happening and we don't know what they are.
But if the aliens are coming,
Dude, what the hell?
or if they're already here,
Oh my God.
what do they want? And are we ready?
We wouldn't stand a chance against them.
Tonight, the highly anticipated report on unexplained aerial phenomena is here, but the answers are not.
We have high-level officials coming forward and saying this is real. We don't know what it is.
For the first time ever, in a short 9-page report, the Pentagon publicly acknowledged that there are things in the sky even they can't understand, defying the laws of physics.
Whoa, splash.
And UFO researchers are working to uncover the truth behind these revelations. Melissa Tittle is a journalist and UFO researcher determined to unlock the truth.
I've been investigating UFOs for about 12 years now. My dad was in the military, so I wanted to find a way to not just find the truth, I wanted to uncover the patterns that were happening to people.
As a former U.S. special agent, UFO researcher Ben Hansen is also well-versed in government secrets and cover-ups.
The bottom line is quite astounding because the government has now told the American people they have no evidence that any one of these cases indicated that these were from our adversaries. Not one of these cases indicated that it was a black project, a secret program of things that we're testing ourselves.
It began in 2017 when 3 U.S. military videos of unidentified aerial phenomenon were leaked to the New York Times. By July 2021, the Pentagon was forced to break its silence.
Oh my God. Do you see that? You see that right there? Whoa, look at that.
But the eyewitness accounts of close encounters have been going on for decades, and they are increasing each day. Strange craft, unidentified flying objects appearing in our skies.
The Air Force Office of Special Investigation, we went out and tried to disinform people who had a UFO sighting or some kind of UFO incident.
But despite the government's attempts to discredit these witnesses, the UFOs keep coming.
What the is that?
And coming.
Whoa.
And coming.
Wow, it's a strange object.
Today, 46% of Americans believe UFOs are a threat to national security.
Oh my God.
That's 150 million true believers.
Whoa.
One of the outcomes of this report was that it gave almost instant validation to a lot of people who felt marginalized. A lot of people in positions of real importance, say, for example, in the military or police officers or pilots, that were afraid of losing their jobs if they discussed it. Now I think finally they can start to come out and we can listen to these people seriously.
In 1972, Dr. J. Allen Hynek of Project Blue Book introduced a classification system for alien encounters.
Dr. J. Allen Hynek is often referred to as the grandfather of ufology. He developed a scale of what we call the close encounters of the first, second, and third kind. A close encounter of the first kind is witnessing a UFO object, and it's a pretty intense experience.
In 2015, I was stationed on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt. We were off the coast of Florida, and one of my buddies walked in from another part of Intel, and he said, hey, you know, check this out. And so I sat down at my computer and I logged in.
As a Navy cryptologist, Matt worked with highly classified signals and intelligence, but nothing prepared him for what he was about to see. It has become known as one of the most famous close encounters of the first kind.
I watched what is now known as the gimbal and go fast footage.
My gosh, look at that thing. It's rotating.
The footage, captured by an F-18 gun camera, features a top-like object moving at impossible speeds against 120-knot headwinds. It's unlike anything Matt and the rest of the crew had ever before witnessed.
In watching it for the first time, I really didn't know what to say. I was just so shocked and floored by it. I really don't remember what happened after that, to be honest with you, because this was such a shock to me that, I mean, for several days I was unable to eat. It really just changes your worldview almost immediately. It wasn't a prank video, it wasn't something that somebody made online. I knew it was real. After a while, I kind of got more curious about where's the propulsion on this? You know, how's it staying in the air? We don't have any kind of technology that can do that. So I would watch it repeatedly.
As Matt watched the video over and over again, he began to realize he was looking at something potentially hostile, not from this world.
It's a difficult thing to watch. In the aftermath of that, I just had this foreboding kind of feeling that started to settle in, and I could not shake that. And I thought it was crazy, you know? So I just put it in the back of my head and I avoided it.
The majority of people just don't want to believe because that means they have to restructure their life.
But then they realize they need to talk. They need to get the truth out there. I have spoken to countless witnesses who have had encounters with UFOs and aliens. At first, they don't want to believe because they have been told their entire lives that extraterrestrials don't exist.
Given the nature of his job, Matt kept quiet about his sighting. So in 2017, he was floored to see the top-secret gimbal and go-fast videos from 2015 suddenly popping up online, along with a video of the so-called Tic Tac taken off the San Diego coast in 2004. He was even more shocked when the US government came forward to authenticate the leaked footage.
What's really interesting is not only are we seeing an increased frequency of releases by the government, but these releases tend to happen as leaks first. Sometimes the information gets out through these leaks and then the military has confirmed it. They're saying, yes, that was taken by our personnel.
Took off, booking it.
Another of the leaked videos that forced the Pentagon's hand showed a UFO with inexplicable capabilities. It's been dubbed the Flying Sphere.
Whoa, it's getting close. The launch, helo, ASAP.
The Flying Sphere was filmed from the USS Omaha's command center just before 11 p.m. on July 15, 2019. At the time, the Navy warship was 100 miles off the coast of San Diego, out on maneuvers. The unidentified craft, estimated to be 6 feet in diameter, followed the Navy ship for about an hour.
Investigators claim that as many as 14 of these objects surrounded the USS Omaha. They saw these both on and off different sensors, and it happened for more than 3 days. The most puzzling thing is they weren't able to lock onto the objects, so they couldn't find out where they're coming from or where they're going to. When this footage was released for the first time, I couldn't believe my eyes.
Traveling 46 to 158 miles per hour, barely fast enough for a conventional aircraft to stay airborne, the object then disappears into the surface of the Pacific Ocean.
Whoa, it's splashed. Mark bearing and range.
So the thing splashes down. They send out a crew to see if there's any wreckage. They send a submarine to see if they can track it. They can't find anything. So where did it go? We haven't even mapped half of the ocean, so we don't even know what could possibly be down there. We're looking to the sky, we're thinking, oh, we're waiting for something to come down, but maybe there's something already here.
After this footage was leaked, the Pentagon's UAP task force verified that the footage is authentic and that the object remains an unknown. But to Matt Roberts, the images were eerily familiar.
My immediate thought on that footage is that it really kind of closely resembles what I remember seeing back in 2015.
Topside, gust of 40.
Splashed. Mark bearing and range.
They were yelling splash, which means obviously that something has gone into the water. To my knowledge, they never found any kind of wreckage or anything. It just vanished. My personal belief is that it went underwater, that these things have the ability to traverse space, the air, and they can traverse the water. We don't have any kind of technology that can do that.
Now that the government has started disclosing the military's close encounters, everyday civilians are coming out of the woodwork more and more to share their accounts.
So the government releasing these videos gives credence to the guy next door who has a video who says, I can't explain this thing happened to me. And to point to the reports and be like, if you don't believe me, this is happening to the military. Why are all these experiences happening now? Why all the sightings? Why all the interactions? Just ask yourself, why?
In June 2021, Ann Chubbs and her family had a shocking close encounter of the first kind on the easternmost shore of Canada.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I went to visit my mother, and when we were leaving, we were walking down the walkway, and I just happened to eye all the lights up in the sky. So I started recording. They were really big, and they're really bright. One was really red on the inside, really red like, oh my God, I can't like fire. Right on, like fire.
The footage Ann captured that night appeared to be a single enormous craft.
You sure they're not Chinese lanterns? No, Ann, they're way too big, boy.
What is the most interesting part for me as a researcher is that this is authentic. This is how people react when they see things that are completely extraordinary.
I'm taking video. Ann, they were showing the same thing up in the States. There were UFOs.
These objects in the sky seem to take on a formation. Their reactions are what tell us that this is not a hoaxed event on their part.
Let's see how far close we can go. They're not no Chinese lanterns.
After seeing other stuff now, I think it was UFO.
Mr. Rhonda, what did you think?
UFO. This particular experience, you can feel the excitement with these women. They're thinking to themselves, what does this mean for me? Could this be real? Does that mean that I know that there is life beyond what I know? To think that we're not alone in this universe is epic.
And you don't show up big like that. You're only little tiny things.
You could feel that all in just a matter of seconds, and that's why these interactions are so important.
Were you excited or frightened?
Oh, we were excited. We're excited. We never get frightened. Not scares us. Excited. We hope they beam us up.
While some people, like Ann and her family, are thrilled by these encounters, many others find them terrifying. And then there are the skeptics.
When Elon Musk first launched his Starlink constellation, is basically a chain of satellites that glimmer and glow, and it's very, very impressive. But the thing with satellites is they're always going to move in a straight line from what we see. That's not what we're seeing in Carbonear.
Based on the movement of the lights, Ann, Brenda, and Rhonda weren't seeing satellites. They were having a genuine close encounter of the first kind. It isn't the first time witnesses have seen a similar formation overhead. For years, people have been tormented by an ominous group of lights that appear to form a giant triangular craft.
I was walking down the hallway, and I happened to glance out the window, and I saw the lights up in the sky.
A close encounter of the first kind with horrifying implications.
I'd never seen anything like that. It was intense. We literally thought we were getting invaded.
The past quarter-century has seen a spike in close encounters of the first kind.
Oh my God, that's one ship.
No. Told ya. I seen them last night.
And some are revealing eerily similar patterns. In May of 1997, Chad Granoski was living with his parents on the southern shore of Lake Oneida in upstate New York.
On the night, I looked out through the kitchen window and I noticed 3 lights up in the sky that, seemed a little peculiar. My dad, he was in the Navy. He knew right away that those weren't anything he's ever seen as far as an airplane. And that's when we ended up getting the video recorder out and started to record. First, there were 3 glowing orbs, and then there were 5. We had up to 12 different lights across the sky right through there. It took 3 to 5 hours, and it was over the course of 2 days.
More than 100 witnesses called into the local authorities that night to report the strange lights from up to 3 hours away.
A lot of skeptics will point to this being military flares. In fact, the local military base declared that it was flares. But are they?
So all those people that really thought they were having experience and really wanted answers completely were shunned by the community that didn't have that experience and told that it wasn't true.
A few days later, my dad and I were at work and my mom called frantic. She said that a large all-black helicopter with a black disc on it was going up and down on the shoreline. And as it went over the houses, it was causing, it seemed to be like an electronic disturbance, like the fire alarm was going off, various electronics. We don't know if it was searching for something or it was emitting something, the magnetic signal or something, trying to erase the tape.
Desperate for answers, the concerned residents clamored for information about any recent helicopter activity at nearby Griffiths Air Force Base.
They kind of gave us the laugh about that they don't have black unmarked helicopters, and they didn't believe the story.
You have to ask yourself, is there some kind of cover-up happening? Are they trying to jam communications, erase video? Clearly, somebody was watching.
What made this sighting even more compelling is that it occurred only months after the famous case in Phoenix, Arizona.
In March of 1997, thousands of people throughout Phoenix saw strange lights passing over the city. To this day, it remains the largest mass UFO sighting in U.S. history. More than a decade later, Ben Hansen interviewed witnesses who remembered their close encounters like it was yesterday.
I was on I-60, was driving home from work, and I saw this huge boomerang-shaped craft flying towards me. I slammed on the brakes. I jumped out of my truck as it came up over me. It was about 30 feet over my head. And I remember thinking I could hit this with a rock. It was a gunmetal gray, and there was like thousands and thousands of thumbprints in it. It just meandered, this huge craft that took up 70% of the horizon. And out of that poured what looked like lava. And I remember thinking, I'm gonna get burned, because I was that close to it. And I stood there, and as it passed by, and I watched it till it went out of sight, I just started crying. It was overwhelming. And that has stuck with me from that day, from that moment.
As with the upstate New York encounter, officials quickly tried to dismiss the Phoenix lights as flares set off during a military exercise.
That's typically the comeback I'll hear if I say, I saw the Phoenix lights. People say, oh, those were flares. I was a fighter pilot in the Air Force in Vietnam. One of our missions was dropping aerial flares. So I've actually dropped those aerial flares and been on the ground while we're being attacked, having the flares overhead. They weren't flares.
That was a slap in the face.
Possessing footage of UFOs can even make you a target. There are just 3 videos in existence of the Phoenix Lights event, and all the owners have been harassed by the US government, the so-called Men in Black. One cameraman even mysteriously disappeared. Chad remembers the night someone came looking for his family's tape of the Oneida Lake Lights.
I was laying in bed and I was facing the windows, and I rolled over because I thought, it felt like somebody was in the room, like there was a presence. And I heard a noise, and there was a tall gentleman, looked like he had a hat, and he was mumbling. And I'm like, what do you want? He said, I want the tape. I want the tape. And he kept saying it, the tape, the tape. I sat up, and the dog in my parents' room, I remember he moved because I could hear the collar jingle, and the guy turned quickly and looked, and then darted out of the room down the hall. And I was like, whoa, what just happened?
Seeing a massive ship overhead is terrifying enough. But what one military flight instructor observed over the skies of Leland, North Carolina in 2014 has filled him with dread to this day. He's chosen to remain anonymous, but did send the footage of his bizarre encounter to MUFON, the world's largest network for documenting unexplained encounters.
It was, I believe, the night after the full moon in May. I was looking through the goggles and noticed a plane coming toward me from the north, heading south. Of course, I've seen planes through night vision goggles. You can hear planes at 5,000 feet, 15,000 feet, 20,000 feet. This thing was low and slow and silent. It made no sense to me. The last weird thing I noticed was that when I took the goggles down for a second to get a bearing as to where it was in the sky, I couldn't see any of the lights, not the fixed lights, not the single blinking light.
Ben has analyzed the video over and over again.
We have something very, very interesting here. As the object is cruising along, there is a point where one of these stars seems like it passes through the object. How is that even possible? Well, it's either 3 lights, 3 orbs traveling together in a very rigid formation, or there's something else going on, and we might be looking at cloaking technology.
Close encounters of the first kind make up the largest number of UFO encounters by far, and can be terrifying. But imagine those spacecraft actually leaving physical evidence behind.
Encounters of the first kind is when you see a sighting, and that's always amazing, and it's great to document. But the second kind is actual physical evidence, which of course for somebody like myself, this is amazing.
Throughout my research, I've had a lot of people giving reports of close encounters of the second kind. Vegetation scorching, radiation, evidence left on the ground that is really difficult to describe as being left by a conventional craft.
Photographer Kerry Mann had his camera aimed at the sky on June 13, 2021, when he got the shock of a lifetime. A close encounter of the first kind that would soon evolve into a close encounter of the second.
I was out there taking night photography shots, trying to get the Milky Way. The Milky Way was supposed to be like at its highest around 11:30 at night. We're in the middle of a pine forest, and we're pretty isolated, we're pretty secluded. There's no airports nearby, so we don't see anything. Like, we don't see things flying over often at all. I was getting some night shots of the stars rising up over the greenhouse, and that was when I heard a really loud sound coming from that direction over the house. Nothing I've ever heard before. It was really loud. It didn't sound like an airplane or a helicopter. It was kind of like a rumbly, mechanical sound. I don't know how else to describe it, but it scared the heck out of me. I quickly looked up, and there's like a spotlight coming down, and I just remember seeing like a big white light with like this spotlight coming down, and it was moving really quickly. So I quickly, holding a really heavy tripod on the camera, turned it over, tried to get the best shot I could, and just went click, 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 click. I got 4 shots. So I came in the house, I put the memory card in the computer, and looked at the pictures, and my jaw just dropped. Like, I couldn't believe what I saw in there. It was so clear in some of the pictures where there's like a spotlight or something coming down. When people keep asking me, like, what did you see? Like, what do you think it was? I don't know what it was, but that was the part that I remember vividly.
Nothing could prepare Kerry for what he found next.
The next morning, the gazebo was flipped over, and it was about 20 yards away, sitting in the middle of our driveway.
Was this proof that the UFO came closer than he even knew, prowling right in his own front yard? In June of 2021, photographer Kerry Mann was taking pictures of the Milky Way when he captured something terrifying.
By the time I heard it and I looked up, it was on one side of the horizon. I quickly took 4 shots and it was gone on the other side of the horizon. So from here to there, gone, and that was it.
But his photographs weren't the only evidence that something bizarre had happened.
I do night photography. It's out in our yard, and we have a gazebo out there, kind of a covered area with a picnic table. The next morning, the gazebo was flipped over, and it was about, 20 yards away, sitting in the middle of our driveway. It was really odd, too, because it was a clear night. It wasn't windy, there weren't any storms or anything. It's got stakes, it's like staked into the ground pretty good, too.
Most people that have had this encounter are usually a little terrified. They're not sure what happened. Why would this happen to me? Am I in danger? Is it gonna come back? These are some of the emotions that I deal with when I interview people that have had encounters of the second kind.
Kerry's encounter was frightening, especially since this same kind of craft has been haunting the Midwestern skies for at least 50 years. It was first reported over rural Ohio in 1973 by 4 members of an Army Reserve helicopter unit. Captain Rick Jesse was at the controls.
We were about 2,000 feet above the ground, and we were flying. Everything was copacetic. It was a clear night. And then all of a sudden, there's a red light in the eastern horizon, and it seems to be coming right at us. It seems to be going pretty fast. Was it 600 knots? Was it 500 knots? I can't say. Was it 1,000? Who knows?
While Rick kept his eyes on his instrument panel, the rest of the crew got a good look at the craft and couldn't believe what they were seeing. A wingless, cigar-shaped metal ship with windows along the top and a red light at the bow.
I only got to see the unit, the object, when it was directly above us. And what I noticed was a very bright white light. It was close enough to be of major concern.
The pilot immediately began evasive maneuvers.
He did an auto rotation, which in a Army helicopters, you basically you cut the throttle and you drop pretty aggressively.
Only the helicopter didn't drop at all. According to crew members' accounts, the UFO took control and pulled the helicopter up 800 feet in 10 seconds.
It moved quickly. And all of a sudden, we noticed that we were a little higher altitude than we typically would fly.
As the crew struggled to regain control, Rick noticed the craft had done more than just lift a helicopter.
The compass just went berserk. It would just spin, and then it would stop. And it would point someplace that it shouldn't be pointing to. It was weird.
It was more than just weird. It was a close encounter of the second kind, physical evidence. Then suddenly the helicopter stabilizes and Captain Jesse is able to land. The next day, the crew sketched out what they saw.
And interestingly, both had sketched very similar objects. And they looked like this.
The object sighted by Rick's crew was stunningly similar to what Kerry captured over his house in Wisconsin.
Could this be the same technology that buzzed Rick all those years ago? Very similar.
Close encounters of the second kind don't just involve moving objects. They also include scorched earth, radiation burns, and blackouts. But that's nothing compared to seeing an actual extraterrestrial, also known as an encounter of the third kind.
A close encounter of the third kind is an alleged witnessing of the actual extraterrestrial occupant. This too seems to have an increase in frequency lately, where people are reporting not just seeing the craft, but finding it perhaps already landed on the ground, and the extraterrestrials either outside of it or interacting with them in their own homes. Every witness I've talked to, when they've had these alleged interactions with extraterrestrials, has basically the same questions. What do they want? What's the agenda?
Those that experience a close encounter of the third kind often describe the ETs in vivid, graphic detail.
And it's this being with these giant eyes, and he has grayish, blackish skin, probably 7 feet tall, very lean, and I'm terrified at this point, but I can't even scream.
What Geraldine encountered is known in ufology as a gray.
The tall grays get a bad reputation for being controlling or manipulating. They have an agenda that's malevolent.
But that's just one of many species that haunt witnesses' third kind encounters.
The mantis beings are also feeding off of you. Some people are terrified, have terrifying experiences with them.
They look like a cross between a human, a salamander, and a praying mantis. It has these massive forearms, right? Like, I was horrified.
When somebody has a reptilian experience, they're afraid and they feel all the control has been taken away from them.
Because this thing was a human body, but he had a creature's head. And he had these massive, very pronounced jawbones.
Those that actually report they've seen the extraterrestrials or interacted with them are very careful about talking about it. So who knows how many hundreds of thousands of other people have had these experiences, yet they don't want to say anything.
Bruce Solheim is one of those people. He's a former Army pilot, Fulbright scholar, and professor with a doctoral degree in American history.
My earliest experiences with aliens or UFOs, I kind of kept it to myself. There's real fear there for people that are in special career fields, and really anybody. You know, when you start talking about this stuff, there's no going back.
But with the government now validating the existence of UFOs, Bruce is finally ready to tell his story on camera for the first time.
When I was 6 years old, I went to bed in downstairs bedroom in our house in Seattle, and in the middle of the night, my cat jumped off the bed, which woke me up.
Bruce's cat approached the window, which immediately filled with a bright light.
There were strange lights coming from weird directions. But I felt very sedated, like I couldn't fully articulate what I wanted to say or my thought process. It's like you're drugged or sedated.
Then he saw it.
I saw what I would classify now as kind of like a tall alien. He had like an upside down teardrop-shaped head. So it was rather frightening. I thought he was a monster.
Stunned, he ran out of his room. But when he tried to explain what he'd seen, he couldn't find the words, literally.
My experience was so traumatic, I couldn't speak for 2 years. I had to be put into speech therapy.
After his horrifying close encounter of the third kind, Bruce Solheim resolved to never speak of it again.
The alien entity that appeared to me, it looked very scary. It looked very frightening. Very tall and obviously not human looking. So I thought he was a monster.
It would be decades before he shared his story.
My first experience in '64 was so traumatic. I couldn't speak. I had a sudden onset speech impediment. I was speaking fine, had no problems before this incident occurred. I couldn't quite register what it was or what happened. So I had this psychological or actually a physical problem with speech.
Years later, Bruce attempted to tell his story, but was met with skepticism over what he experienced.
I honestly think that the majority of people just don't want to believe. They have to understand that there is more things out there than they can possibly quantify, and that means believing in the unknown. That means believing in something they don't understand.
Close encounters of the third kind, like Bruce's, have been publicly shamed for decades. Case in point, Arizona Governor Fife Symington's reaction to the hundreds of eyewitnesses reporting on the Phoenix Lights.
The Phoenix Lights is one of the biggest events that has happened. It's not just one person or two people. Lots of people saw the Phoenix Lights, and they wanted answers. And the Arizona governor kind of made fun of it.
In response, I suggested that it was time to end months of speculation on the question, to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Now, this just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
So all those people that really thought they were having experience and really wanted answers completely were shunned. Years later, he comes back out and he says, look, I really thought it was an extraterrestrial. I really thought that they were aliens. You could argue that the Arizona governor was following what the federal government was doing, which was to just tell people they're crazy.
It's well documented that since Roswell in the late 40s, the government not only studied what should be told to the people if they had information about extraterrestrials, but they put a plan into place. That plan included systematic ridicule, debunking.
Richard Doty is a former agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. During the 80s, his job was to disinform the public about real UFO encounters. Now, he admits to covering up over 100 cases.
Richard Doty is probably as close as you're going to get to talking to someone who's one of the fabled men in black. He worked for a branch of the Air Force that specializes in controlling information.
I positively know that the United States government has interacted with extraterrestrials. When I came on board in 1978, through to 1988, these plans were in place to cover up encounters with ETs.
His testimony serves as evidence that the government has known the truth about close encounters of the first, second, and third kinds for decades.
There were incidents that involved UFOs that exhibited some really out-of-this-world maneuvers. We didn't want the public to believe that we were not in control of the airspace. So we would make them believe it was one of ours.
Richard Doty didn't just cover up close encounters like Chad Granoski's. He also witnessed UFOs himself.
While I was stationed at Area 51, we saw strange things flying. Doing these extraordinary maneuvers, flying 700 miles an hour and stopping in midair. We found out later these crafts were in fact ET crafts that we obtained somehow.
Richard Doty even had a terrifying third kind encounter of his own inside Tonopah Air Force Base in Nevada in the early 1980s with what he believes was a gray.
There was reports of strange crafts flying in and out of there. Myself and two other OS agents went out there. We surveyed the area. We looked around. We found a tunnel. We knew that there wasn't supposed to be a tunnel there. We had an actual diagram of this area, and it seemed like this tunnel had been burnt. So as we approached this, we walked probably 20 yards inside this tunnel, and as we got closer, and we saw lights at the end of this tunnel. As we were walking towards it, that's when this creature then appeared. It was about 7 or 8 foot tall, and it was moving. The arms are longer than normal on a human. So we turned around and left and reported it. There was some sort of a confrontation. Later on, that area was bombed.
Not only are UFO encounters of the first, second, and third kinds on the rise, but there's also been a spike in far more horrific encounters of the fourth kind, alien abductions. In 1972, J. Allen Hynek invented the classification system for close encounters of the first, second, and third kind. But since then, more levels have been added, all the way up to close encounters of the seventh kind. In close encounters of the fourth kind, people have reported being abducted by aliens and taken aboard a UFO.
Having somebody or something take you from your home and perform experiments or do some sort of examination on you without usually your consent is a terrifying thing.
What can you do? You can't call the police. You can't call your doctor. You're stuck in this fear of this thing coming back to do more things, more harm. The amount of fear that some of these people might have with these experiences is immense.
Abduction victims often experience blackouts and missing time, some with nothing but a suspicion that they were taken. When they can finally recall what happened to them, the answers are often terrifying, like the case of Myrna Hansen out of northern New Mexico.
Myrna Hansen was driving with her son. A light shines down. She prepares for some kind of impact, and then poof. They wake up in her car several hours later, missing time, gas tank's empty, and she doesn't know what has happened. When Myrna went through regression, what she recalled was terrifying.
The first thing she remembers is being ushered into some sort of operating room.
Myrna remembers laying down on a dissection table. She tries to escape. She's tagged back down. And she remembers her 6-year-old son, lifeless, next to her.
The nightmare was far from over.
When she looked around, what she describes as tanks of body parts, almost like failed human experiments, surrounding her. In many interactions, this isn't the end. This might just be the beginning. She might be a target now for many other experiments.
It's common for abductees to be targeted several times. That turned out to be the case for one of the most famous survivors of a close encounter of the fourth kind, Calvin Parker.
I actually met with Calvin Parker down at his home in Pascagoula, Mississippi. He shared with me a detailed description of the creatures and the craft they took him aboard.
In 1973, Calvin and his friend were fishing off the banks of the Pascagoula River in southern Mississippi when they were suddenly approached by 3 otherworldly beings surrounded by a blinding light.
I noticed there was 3 bulky looking, I thought at the time it was police officers or something. But it was bulky looking creatures coming toward us. And they got a little closer, and I knew right then that we was in a lot of trouble, or somebody was playing a real dirty joke on us. It wasn't nothing like I've never seen in this world. They was gray in color. They had skin that kind of looked like an elephant, but they moved mechanically. Their arms was a little longer in proportion with their body than what a human's arms was. Their hands, I call them crab-like hands. They got the pinchers instead of regular fingers.
What Calvin saw that night was a modified tall gray. Suddenly, Calvin was dragged into what appeared to be a craft and subjected to horrifying experiments.
Take me toward this table and laid me at a 45-degree angle. I was laying there, I was looking straight up, and then I felt this presence coming in, and it's what I call a female. Then she took her 2 middle fingers, she ran them down my throat, and I started choking and bleeding.
Calvin had to keep his secret hidden for years. The public ridicule was immense. He went into hiding, basically. But to me, that adds to his credibility. Calvin is telling the truth as he remembers it. This was not a hoax. And what's even more surprising with my visit with Calvin is that he said he was visited again years later.
Yeah, in '93, I was fishing a little while. And I had all this missing time in there. And I couldn't account for it.
As in Calvin's case, a victim's first abduction encounter is rarely their last. Fourth-kind encounters are being reported all across the country, from rural farms to urban centers. Many of these victims share eerily similar memories of being subjected to gruesome experiments.
One grabbed me by the left arm, and I automatically felt an injection.
There are these three beings, and they were rubbing their fingers on my brain.
We have another case in Brazil where the man's eyes were surgically removed. He was still alive.
Abductions can be extremely traumatic, but some abductees report something that borders on nefarious. They describe hearing the aliens talk to them. This is a close encounter of the fifth kind.
Close encounter of the fifth kind is a report of direct communication with the extraterrestrial. This also seems to be on the rise. We have a lot of people now who are reporting that not only have they communicated, but there's a two-way open channel where sometimes by way of meditation or being able to call them down from the sky, lucid dreaming, leaving the body, a lot of these different ways they're receiving messages.
One victim had an alien voice forced into his consciousness. His name is Daryl Sims.
Approximately 4 years old, I sensed something wrong in the room, opened my eyes. It was a strange-looking little creature with a large bulbous head walking toward the wall. He was a little bit bigger than me, but his head was huge with no mouth other than a tiny little slit, no ears, and two little holes for a nose. I didn't realize I had already been taken, brought back, placed in my bed, and at that point, he apparently heard me thinking that and turned around, and I heard for the first time someone else's voice in my head saying, "It's awake." That started the encounter.
With close encounters of the fifth kind on the rise, survivors have begun sharing their experiences with one another, like at this Sacramento-based support group.
I got out of the car and looked down over the valley, and there was this mass floating over.
And did you yourself have any contact with occupants?
Yes. This voice came back.
"I'm here."
And I said, "Where are you from?" And he paused, and then he said,
"Zeta Reticuli."
Even right now, all of the hair on the back of my neck just stood right up.
Some people describe very benevolent interactions.
It's English. It was a male voice, actually. And it said, very calm, very serene voice. It says, "Why are you suffering?"
Others describe horrifying things.
In 2009, Rob Fullington says he was first abducted by aliens. Since then, he has had numerous interactions with them.
I see this being outside the window. He's just standing there, staring at me, right? He's about 6 feet tall, white skin, light bulb-shaped head, black almond eyes. People call him tall white Zetas. He's standing there, and I hear him in my head. And it says, "Are you ready to go?"
Rob is powerless to keep this species of Zeta alien out. He loses time and wakes up with injuries he can't explain. He's convinced the aliens have been watching him ever since.
What can you do? You can't call the police, but you can call Daryl Sims. He'll take your case seriously. He'll investigate it, try to find you an answer.
My name is Daryl Sims. I'm also known as the Alien Hunter. I look for medical and scientific evidence of alleged human-alien contact. One of the most interesting is a case where the DA and his wife were abducted, and you can tell the time he was abducted is 11/29 here. His wife told him the next day after their horrific event with witnesses involved that you need to take your watch down and get it fixed because it quit working. And he said, okay, and the watchmaker opened it up and said, the reason your watch is not working is because it's been completely melted from the inside.
But now that aliens are making contact, one question remains.
Why now, and what do they want?
While alien hunter Daryl Sims has interviewed many abductees, he doesn't believe they're powerless.
Contactees are often referred to by me as honeybees. They don't even mind that somebody in a funny little white suit with large black eyes is stealing their honey. People like me, we're like killer bees. If you go to a killer bee's nest and steal the honey, you're gonna wish you hadn't done that.
Most of the close encounters of the fifth kind that Daryl has investigated feature aliens reaching out and sending messages to people. But some people turn the tables and send messages to the aliens instead.
For anybody who thinks that it's crazy that people are trying to contact aliens, I have one word for you: SETI. Search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
SETI utilizes highly advanced telescope systems to scan the galaxy for intelligent life. And they've received some strange signals in the past. But recently, individuals like Tyler Zaradnik and Tim Cash are not only receiving messages, they're sending them as well.
My name is Tyler Zaradnik. My military occupational specialty serving was a 13 Foxtrot, which is the Joint Fire Support Specialist. I was able to identify enemy mechanized equipment with only the silhouette from miles away, using an LLDR, which is a laser location rangefinder.
As a young man, Tyler had a close encounter of the first kind, witnessing a UFO that turned his world upside down.
It changed me profoundly, and it made me look at reality in an entirely different way. And that became a lifelong interest and passion in researching extraterrestrials and the possibility of communicating with them. So after I got out of the military, I decided that we were going to shift gears to go out and directly make contact.
Tyler and his crew began researching how they could combine their conscious thoughts with modern technology, such as radio signals and long-range lasers.
So I realized that the implications of consciousness being used as a modality to communicate with highly advanced civilizations is not only possible, but I think is accurate. If there are highly advanced civilizations coming here, consciousness is the key component.
Convinced that they had come upon a means to communicate, the crew decided to test it out.
So the team and myself, we organized an expedition out to Joshua Tree, California. This was a couple months ago at this point, and we were sending out the tones, which are synthesized audio signals that provide the coordinates, latitude and longitude to our location. We were using laser pointers and making vectoring signals in the sky. I look over to the right of me in the sky at about my 2 o'clock, and out of nowhere, these small circular orbs of light are performing maneuvers and flight characteristics that are clear indications that they're not conventional aircraft, they're not drones, they're not airplanes, they're not helicopters, they're not Chinese lanterns.
As the orbs dispersed, something even larger appeared in the night sky.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God, that's one ship. That's one ship.
And unfortunately in the footage you can't see it because the camera just didn't pick it up. But in between those two lights that were moving together, there was some outline of some object that was cigar-shaped.
There was what I've described as like a spider's web of light. Kind of faint, kind of gappy in it, like little gaps. And it was cylindrical, but almost higher at one side and slightly lower on the other.
We would have these small circular illuminating orbs come into our airspace, and we would signal at them with the laser pointers, and then they would phase in and out and then vanish. We were seeing objects as a team that appeared to be communicating back to us with signaling. Yeah, let's see. Oh, that was twice at us, it blinked.
Incredibly, after this massive craft disappeared, other orbs blinked several times before they also vanished. But Tyler believes there's more than just light and audio signals attracting these craft to his crew.
Beautiful. Hello. If there are ETs that are coming here, and I'm strongly convinced that they are, their technology is going to be interfacing with thought. So through different techniques of meditation, we're able to interface and interact with their communication systems.
Setting up this channeling for Tyler's crew is meditation specialist Sharon Amber. She utilizes a technique known as coherent thought sequencing. It's the ultimate close encounter of the fifth kind.
So coherent thought sequencing, it's basically just getting the whole group in resonance with the same intention. So we can focus on, a call, we can focus on a word, we can focus on a mantra, and it's just creating the atmosphere and that almost kind of like a signal or a wave from the group that's all in resonance with the same thing.
Using this technique, Sharon has made contact with multiple UFOs.
I talk to them, I communicate with them, I channel them. It's all frequency. That's all. This is all of this is. It's just energy. So it makes sense that, those who are a little bit more in tune with their feelings are able to go a little bit deeper into themselves and communicate.
And the group must have been in sync, on the same wavelength the night of their interviews, because suddenly, the crew spots something in the sky above Los Angeles.
Where? Right there, Mark. You see that one? Right there. You see that? Are you kidding me? I got the satellite tracker, hold on.
Tyler checks to see if the objects are satellites passing overhead, but the sat tracker shows a clear sky. What they have is a genuine UFO.
We're here on site right now. We just had multiple craft come in during our filming. Check it out. Yo, we got two. We got two of them.
To have a successful close encounter of the fifth kind, the crew uses 5 milliwatt lasers, which have a range of nearly a mile, to signal the UFO.
Oh my goodness. Right there.
After 10 minutes, the craft seems to respond, executing a maneuver that defies physics.
Everyone have eyes on this?
It then flashes 2 times.
Oh, well, dude. Oh, hello.
And vanishes.
Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind is direct communication with extraterrestrial life. And I feel that we are at a point we are ready to communicate with them. And the way that we are communicating with them is not how we have been trying to communicate with them in the past, which is let's send up a satellite with some mathematical numbers and some music and all that kind of stuff. How we are going to communicate with them is our ability to control our coherent thought process.
Yasmin Joyner is a high school animation teacher who's been summoning UFOs since 2015 using the technique of CE5 protocols. She wasn't always a believer.
I'm a little bit of a reluctant witness. I'm very skeptical. I'm one of those people that's a see it to believe it type of person.
Her journey started when she began researching a communication method known as the CE5 protocols.
CE5 is a group of protocols, and what you're supposed to do is kind of integrate your consciousness with meditation and the intention of love and connecting with these UFOs. I was doing CE5 protocols for about 3 months at the time, and I was still on the fence. For whatever reason, I woke up extremely early. I woke up at about 5:30 in the morning. It was crystal clear blue and not hazy and cloudy. And as I came out of my garage, I saw this ball of light. It was perfectly spherical. It was bright to look at, but it didn't hurt my eyes to see. It hung around for a couple of minutes. I was in shock and in awe. I wasn't thinking, oh, let me try to contact this thing, or oh, let me try to communicate. What I did was just kind of say like, good morning, and go like, good morning, hi, nice to see you. And after I did this, this ball of light spun around extremely fast and then just floated around tandem with me as I came up the hill.
After her encounter, Yasmin began digging into the science of how these craft were communicating with humans.
Once I had a close encounter of a UFO at about 20 feet away, it broke my paradigm down, and it made me look at other avenues that were related, especially to quantum mechanics and quantum physics. And to me, the logical place to go would be, is telekinesis possible, aerokinesis, telepathy, remote viewing, any of that kind of stuff? And could I find someone who was demonstrating it legitimately?
Yasmin's deep dive into quantum physics and aerokinesis has unlocked a new world for her.
Ever since doing this kind of stuff and putting it out publicly, I have met tons of people who come to me and tell me about their experiences.
People like Yasmin across the country have begun experimenting with CE5 protocols. Many believe if the government will not be forthcoming about UFO information, then the people will get it on their own.
So many people are coming forward with encounters because there's a more desire to want the truth. And they know that they're not getting it from the sources that they're supposedly supposed to give the truth. So humans are now open to that. And that means that they're open to communication.
While Yasmin's method may seem harmless, there's a far more sinister theory to explain encounters of the fifth kind. And it all starts with alien implants.
There's the idea that certain people have this ability to communicate or be a target for alien species.
But where does this ability come from? Is it hardwired? Is it learned? There's one theory that says it's actually put inside of them. The technology to communicate is actually implanted in the form of a microchip or a tag.
Rob Fullington believes he was abducted by aliens and implanted with one of these devices.
I hear him in my head, you know, right? Like, almost like when you're thinking to yourself, but yet it's a voice outside of your own, right? And it's obviously an intrusive thought. That's the scary part.
The voices demand Rob open the doors of his house.
I remember cursing and saying, oh, hell no, I ain't gonna let you in, dude. And it said, this is gonna happen every single night until you let me in.
Unable to sleep or function, he decided to find out exactly what happened to him the night he was abducted by undergoing regression hypnosis.
So we'll begin by taking some deep breaths, just breathing now. I'm just gonna jump forward a little bit to some of the experiences that have left implants.
There are two. They're under my tongue.
And do you know what these implants are monitoring or doing?
No.
Like many abductees, Rob hopes to find the exact location of the implant and have it removed. Abduction investigator Daryl Sims has worked on many cases involving implants and has helped victims get them extracted.
I've been doing this work for a long time, and the entities prefer that you communicate on a mental level with them. And we have plenty of physical evidence that some use an implanted object to take over your facilities, your mind, your operations. The interesting thing about the UFO phenomena, there actually is evidence. Sometimes UFOs leave traces of their own metal. I've done 27 surgical interventions around the world.
Daryl has collected a vast trove of implanted materials over the course of his career. But there's one implant case he will never forget. Years ago, Daryl interviewed a young girl in Roswell, New Mexico.
While we were in Roswell, a little girl told her mother a strange little man came into her room and put something into her. And it's a nightmare of every child.
The little girl was clearly traumatized and could not remember any details. Daryl presented her with his chart of alien species to hopefully jog her memory.
She flipped open and she saw that and she jumped backwards. Nothing bothered her but that one. And I said, is there something about that body? She was crying. She said, the eyes.
All at once, her memories rushed back. She remembers being visited by the alien that proceeded to insert an implant in her eye. After their experiences, eyewitnesses and researchers like Daryl and Yasmin are left with one question. What do the ETs want?
Whatever these things are, I do think that they're intelligent. I think that they have an agenda. And one thing that I think that's very similar, I feel, is tagging animals. We tag animals to track them. We do this to dolphins, we do this to whales, sharks, all kinds of animals. Why wouldn't another civilization do the same to us?
But are the extraterrestrials friends or foes? Are they spiritual allies or want to do us harm?
Instead of a spiritual awakening, some of these experiences, they have a malevolent intent, that they're there to do harm.
Threat to the abductees, to the contactees, they don't see it. They don't get it. They've been so controlled in their thinking that they think, well, anything they do to us, regardless of what it is, it's probably for our highest and best good. So we shouldn't be complaining.
Alien mind control is one thing. But what happens if there is actual physical contact with an ET, resulting in loss of life? A close encounter of the sixth kind is considered an extreme version of a second kind encounter, in which things go terribly wrong.
Close encounter of the sixth kind is defined by some researchers as involving the death of a human or an animal, which is terrifying in itself. Was this an experimentation gone wrong? Was it deliberate? What do they need the DNA or the substance from this living organism for?
In May 2021, several cattle mutilations were reported in Crook County, Oregon. Could this be the work of malevolent aliens?
Their eyeballs are missing. They have these weird puncture wounds. Sometimes their tongues are cut out. It's as if some kind of machine came down, sucked out the blood of the animal, and cut out certain incisions, and then just left it there. It's just weird. An animal doesn't do that, and there's no human instrument that can do that either.
Daryl Sims reveals a new and more troubling report about these unearthly capabilities.
There is another case that I find even more interesting. The rancher took off to go get his food and supplies. He comes back, his cows have been carbonized, literally. Carbonized means it just reduces something, a glass-like material. It is literally no explanation whatsoever for it. The chickens were carbonized. He's looking for his field hand, and the field hand is inside his home, and he's been completely carbonized. No explanation whatsoever for it.
One location seems to be ground zero for cattle mutilations, Dulce, New Mexico.
For some reason, the spike in the cattle mutilations was so iconic that there's still people going there today to see why that location.
I met with a member of the Dulce, New Mexico community about why he thought these aliens were mutilating and abducting cattle. And the answer he gave me was very compelling.
Avery Tafoya has witnessed dozens of mutilation cases, and he believes the mutilations are just the beginning.
I think they were using the cows as like an incubator for like the hybrids they were trying to create.
Avery believes aliens are using animals as test subjects as the basis for their ultimate experiment, human-alien hybrids.
This theory that extraterrestrials are using unknown medical technology to create alien-human hybrids is actually the top of the close encounter scale. Those who say they've been subjected to this horrifying procedure would be labeled as being victims of a close encounter of a seventh kind. This is something they'll never forget.
Naval cryptologist Matthew Roberts believes that after citing the Gimbal and Go Fast videos, aliens have been visiting him with the intention to reproduce.
I was asleep, and I felt somebody grab my arm. So I try to lift my hand to my face to, wipe the sleep out of my eyes, and I realized that I couldn't move.
Matt struggles to comprehend what's happening.
So I fought, to turn my head to the right to see who was standing over me. And as I turned my head, my room got blurrier and darker. And so I saw this shadow figure standing over me. It was just a torso, 2 arms and a head was all I could make out. And then a face appeared.
The face of a female extraterrestrial.
I knew immediately. I just put all the dots together. This woman on top of me is not human. I start scanning up to see her face, and her face is a blur. Her face is blurred out. She's on top of me. She's having sex with me. And her skin, her skin was, it was much thicker and tighter than normal human skin would be. And her skin was blue.
Women have also reported having these types of encounters.
I've always been very skeptical of this type of encounter, but I met with Geraldine Orozco, who describes a very specific incident involving a close encounter of the seventh kind.
Over the course of several years, Geraldine had numerous pregnancies that all ended mysteriously.
I had the miscarriage, and the miscarriage has no fetus, but it is incredibly painful. I didn't understand what was happening. It was traumatizing. The kind of illness that I was experiencing was not something that the doctor could explain. My cycle was out of balance, physical things, marks on the body.
Geraldine recalls nights when she believes she was abducted and the fetus is actually removed from her body.
I was sleeping, and all of a sudden I wake up because there's a bright light in my room. And next thing I know, my entire body paralyzes.
Close encounters of the seventh kind are the stuff of nightmares. Reports of alien fetuses torn from their human mothers' wombs.
I was literally taken out of my bedroom in Union City, and I was taken on board a craft. More importantly, they introduced me to children that they said were mine.
The category Close Encounters of the Seventh Kind was created to help explain the phenomena where people are reporting they're not only having communication, involvement, abduction, but they're also involved, they believe, in some sort of hybridization program.
And as I'm looking at these children, they're absolutely beautiful, but they're not all the way human. This gray, thin skin that he has in his face, it's a much bigger head, a bigger skull, and these giant eyes that are so deep and so profound. As soon as I made eye contact with them, I began to recall all of the memories that I had had with them previously, times where I had been on board a craft, experiences that I had physically.
I interviewed her, and we had a voice stress analysis given. I looked for other explanations. I looked for high EMF fields in her bedroom, anything that might cause hallucinations, disturbances. I didn't find evidence of that. One thing's for sure, Geraldine believes that this happened, and I don't think she was part of any hoax.
Since Geraldine became aware that she was part of a hybridization program, she started a support group for other victims. Little did she know, hundreds of women just like her have been hiding their darkest secrets in plain sight.
Hi, my name is Erin Montgomery. I am a marriage and family counselor. I live in Montrose, Colorado. I have been an ET contactee since I was a small child.
Hi, my name is Christina Vogelsang, and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Melanie Young from El Paso, Texas. I've been involved with ETs since the age of 3.
While many victims of the hybridization program are still afraid to make their stories public, these witnesses have agreed to tell their stories for the first time.
When I hit puberty is when the hybridization program for me started.
I just learned in the first part of 2020 that I am part of the Human Hybridization Program.
I wasn't aware that I was part of the hybrid program until I was in my late 30s, where I had an experience in which a baby was removed from me, and I was very emotional.
And it's not just women used for this breeding program. 30% of reported victims are men.
My name is Gabe Salomon. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and I discovered that I was a part of the hybridization program around the time that I was 17.
Regardless of age, gender, or geography, all these survivors have one thing in common. Their experience has been horrific.
When these experiences started to first happen, as you can imagine, there was a sense of fear and anxiety, paranoia.
Upon waking, I had bruises like fingerprints on my inner thighs, and my eyes were very swollen and red.
After my return, I had several physical symptoms, ailments that ranged anywhere between migraine headaches, seizures, nosebleeds.
But perhaps the most horrifying aspect is the reason for this program. Some believe the hybrid program was part of a deal cut between the aliens and the U.S. government. According to Ike Eisenhower's great-granddaughter, Laura Eisenhower, the deal goes back decades.
Supposedly in 1954, there was a meeting at Muroc Air Force Base, and that is known as the meeting with the Greys and the Greada Treaty. They presented themselves as a dying race and seemed to have possible diplomatic intention, but just needed a few things in the exchange for advanced technology, but it ended up getting out of control.
According to Laura Eisenhower, the U.S. government allowed the hybrid program to target certain individuals, which may explain why victims like Geraldine have been visited over and over again.
Within the past 6 months, I had become pregnant again. The day that I believe that I was inseminated, I had contact experience in that I was going for a walk and I saw craft. I met with these incredible, strange beings. People call them tall whites, very, very tall, about 7 foot tall. Very, very white skin with these long robes, very iridescent kind of beings. This happened consecutively over 3 days. And as a result of that, going into a pregnancy that was terminated, of course, not in a miscarriage.
In order to better describe the horror, Geraldine has done a painting of her most recent experience.
This is just a quick painting about an experience that I had in which one time when they were removing a fetus out of my body, I was on a metallic slab. When I was able to look through the side to the right of me, I saw walls and walls of these incubation tanks with fetuses of different sizes, different colors.
Could the aliens be growing an army of hybrids?
If the activity's increasing, does it mean that we're being prepared for an ultimate disclosure, for a melding to our space brothers and sisters?
My initial question was, why me? But what I quickly realized was that there was nothing special about me. It was just something that actually a lot of women were experiencing, hundreds.
Could all these women be part of an alien program bent to harvest reproductive cells? And if so, to what end?
Are we on the cusp of evolving as humans? Are they here to enlighten us and to help save us? Or are they here for nefarious purposes? Could this be the end of our existence?
Since the government issued its declassified report on UFOs, a terrifying new era is upon us. Each day, reports increase of close encounters of the first kind, simply witnessing a UFO, all the way up to close encounters of the seventh kind, participation in a human-alien hybridization program.
And I think one of the things that's happened since that UAP report is that my support groups are filled with people. And it's like people have had an approval to be like, okay, we're not crazy, there's permission, let's talk about it.
But there's so much the Pentagon is still keeping secret, maybe for their own nefarious reasons, maybe for our own good.
My real take on the whole thing is, I feel like it's just a cover-up by the government. I believe recently that there's been some deals made for our government to fully take control of it and release it when they feel fit. Now, with the internet and the phones and, the recent Pentagon report, I feel like they're getting pressured to, really slowly maybe acclimate us to it by trickling information out, so when they finally come out, there isn't a mass panic like World of Worlds overnight. Go get the milk and the bread because we're getting invaded.
Listen, I am red, white, and blue. I volunteered during the Vietnam War when everybody else was running the other direction. But the mere fact that so much of this stuff has been hid for so long, now they're trying to cover everything they can. Problem is, it's just getting out more and more.
And with the evidence mounting, many believe we are at a crossroads.
Whether you've had a close encounter or not, there's some pretty serious questions we need to be asking. Who are they? What do they want? Are we on the cusp of a major change? Based on their air and space superiority and the fact that in some of these encounters they render humans powerless, there's some potentially terrifying answers to those questions.
Some witnesses hold on to the hope that these extraterrestrials could mean salvation.
Seeing UFOs has taken me down a path that I never, ever in my life expected to go down. It forced me to be more inquisitive. It forced me to be more reflective and more loving. Yes, there was some bumps in the road, but ultimately everything has been amazing.
But others are convinced these visitors do not come in peace.
In my opinion, we should be worried just as much as the South American Indians worried when they saw those ships come up out of the water.
In a way, these interactions with the military are a display of power. I mean, our F-15s can't even keep up with some of them. And you have to think to yourself, are they saying we're more powerful than you are? And is that a threat?
At this stage, outmaneuvered and outgunned, humanity may be facing an all-out reckoning.
I still stand by my oath. Not only will I protect my country from enemies foreign and domestic in the civilian sector, but I will protect my planet against enemies foreign and domestic.
I think that this whole topic of the phenomenon is really, this is the only issue that matters. People think that, oh, I'm so busy with my life. I got the kids, I got my job, there's the pandemic, the economy. Those issues pale in comparison to this subject.
The aliens are coming. The question is, are we ready? And that question will actually define, are we going to evolve or are we ready to self-destruct?